Welcome to today's Pause Reflection. First, a trivia question. What song has been number one in the music charts and has the oldest lyrics? You might be thinking of hymns like Amazing Grace or The Lord's My Shepherd, but they've not been number one in the charts. This song was originally written in the 50s, but covered by the Byrds and became number one in 1965. Maybe some of you remember it. It's called Turn, Turn, Turn. Its lyrics are the first 8 verses of Ecclesiastes chapter 3, written by the teacher, son of David, over 2,500 years ago. The poem has couplets of opposites which describe our world of extremes. I've heard and read this passage many times. I had it at my own wedding. You can ask why when you see me next. It's also been the passage used in over a quarter of the funerals that I've done, with many of those being in the last 2 years. This passage is chosen perhaps because the themes relate to many aspects of our lives, the cycle of life, relationships, work, emotions, the stuff we give most of our time to and care about. It also reveals the cyclical, fleeting nature of life, a life of seasons, and that there's a season for everything under the sun. As in this poem, life is so often a study in opposites. It's about extremes, yet we're often caught out by the ups and downs of life when we really should expect them. C.S. Lewis in the Screwed Letters calls this the law of undulation, that a high point will always be followed by a low point, and then another high, and then another low. Like a wave, waves of all kinds go up and down, electromagnetic, microwave, light and sound waves, as well as waves on a beach. Now, life isn't so exact and as regular as that. Sometimes we have a series of highs, with lots of good things happening, one after another. Others, it's the other way around. We have the saying, it never rains, but it pours, meaning we get a lot of lows, one after the other. Many of us will look on the pandemic season as the latter, yet the law of undulation remains true. It's inevitable. A streak of bad things will come to an end with something good happening. After a season of blessing, we may have a tragedy. It's not guaranteed, but we can expect it. C.S. Lewis says we should expect it so we're not rocked by it. We mustn't be surprised by the ups and downs of life. If we embrace the cyclical, fleeting nature of life, we'll be more able and prepared to handle difficult times when they come. Now, Christians, myself included, are often confused and saddened following an amazing spiritual experience, maybe at a retreat, a camp, a conference, a festival, worship service, or even a vacation. There's been a high, a feeling of deep emotional joy and excitement. It's great, we're riding on the crest of a wave. Then we come home, back to the daily grind of work or school, daily chores and all the mishaps of life. And we can quickly sink into disappointment and despair and question the reality of that experienced high. We think that real spiritual experiences should last longer than they do. Now, it's human to just want the good stuff, the joys, the highs, the excitement, as if those are what God wants us to have all the time. But the teacher in Ecclesiastes reminds us of the law of undulation. Highs naturally lead to lows. Rather than be frustrated by life, we can view these waves as okay, only to be expected. In spiritual lows, if we start feeling that something's wrong, that we're failures or spiritual nobodies, we need to remember that nothing is wrong. The law of undulation is at work. The lows, the troughs won't last forever. Yes, there is a time for pain and mourning, but there is also a time of joy. Life is cyclical. Following the poem, Ecclesiastes 3 verse 9 says, "What does a worker gain from his toil, from all those activities?" Now, God gives us humans all these things to do, not as a burden, but to occupy us in this cyclical, fleeting life. God has designed each activity so it has an appropriate time to be done. God's also placed in the human heart a sense that there is a greater overall plan for all things. Yet he hasn't given us the ability to perceive this greater plan or understand his agenda from beginning to end. He wants us to have faith in him, to trust him. We don't understand God's plan or purposes, but he has given us a pathway to joy. Verse 12 says, "There's nothing better for people to be joyful and do good while they live." We can be joyful and do good during the time we have on earth, no matter the circumstances or the season. We can't know it all, but we can be satisfied and even happy with what we do know, with the life, the work and relationships that God has given us. We can experience joy in the midst of our fleeting life, even in the difficult times. But it requires a change of thinking, a new mindset. Not the secular mindset of dissatisfaction and always wanting more, which leads to materialism and consumerism. This is the mindset that we can bring to our faith, making us dissatisfied about many elements of our faith or our church, which all results in a lack of joy. Ecclesiastes advocates a view of life that trusts God to answer the big questions and for us humans to live simply and joyfully. Paul in Philippians chapter 4 tells us what we should let our minds think on. Things that are true, good, noble, right and pure. Fixing our minds this way will help us keep the different seasons of life in perspective. What we choose to fix our minds on during these undulations, these seasons of life, changes how we handle those seasons. So where does your mind go during times of good and not so good? To things that are good, true, noble, right and pure, or on other things like resentment or anger? Why not take a moment to read that passage in Ecclesiastes so that you can focus on God, the one who never leaves us alone, nor forsakes us, and walks with us in and through all our times and seasons, through all our undulations, and gives us joy. Why not pause and read and reflect? Thank you.